Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So a lot of people have asked me, like, what I feel about the dollar losing the world reserve currency status and how nations like China and Russia are now moving in a direction that is outside the dollar dominance, using yuan to do trades in oil. This type of interaction between these countries is a very clear warning sign that the dollar is not necessarily the king for all nations out there. You can see it when it comes to these transactions between these particular nations. Now, I have said this many times, and I will continue to say it until I see things change, is that even though these nations are doing deals inside of their respective currencies, their own sovereign currencies, it's not enough to knock the dollar off that world reserve currency status, right? Now, is it moving in a direction of it? Sure. Is it going to replace it anytime soon? I don't think so. And you can really see the evidence of that when you think about what it is that gives the dollar that world reserve currency status. See, there's really two things that need to happen. Back when we were in a gold standard, we had gold back in the money. So gold was the ultimate asset. But now gold is not part of the monetary system. Now there are central banks that do hold gold as part of their balance sheet. But as far as backing the currency goes, that's done with debt. And now mainly when you think about the debt that it is backed by, it's backed by U.S. Treasuries, the debt of the United States government. When the government goes into debt, it sells U.S. Treasuries. And now a lot of people look at U.S. Treasuries as an investment. They think, hey, I can buy U.S. Treasuries and get a return on it. But what you're really doing is you're lending money to the government. And now when you lend this money to the government, this is the ability to get the treasuries out into the market, and it gives the government the ability to spend that money. Now, when they tax us, that's how they get the money back in order to cover a lot of the treasury interest rates, right? Because they don't really actually cover the treasury since we just rolled the old debt into new debt. Now, when we think about this U.S. Treasuries and how this safe and liquid asset is somewhat similar to what gold used to be. Not really, because it's a debt and gold is a real asset, so they're not even remotely close to being the same thing, but they kind of serve the purpose when it comes to this world reserve currency. Because when gold was the ultimate asset, now we got U.S. Treasuries that everybody is looking at as the ultimate asset. Now, if you have faith in the U.S. government, no problem. But if you don't, really what you have to understand is that the U.S. Treasuries are guaranteed to pay, right? Zero chance of default. Like, zero chance. They have the Federal Reserve to print as much money to pay as many debts as the United States wants. The only problem with it is it cannot guarantee the purchasing power of the dollar. And that's where everybody is losing track of what is really happening here. Because the inflation scenario has been pushed so dramatically within the people, it's hard for them to look at it any other way. They see the dollar failure. They see these nations moving away from the dollar. They're doing, bilateral trades within their own sovereign currencies, getting out of the dollar system, the SWIFT system, and all that other stuff. And this really leads you to believe that the dollar is going to fail. Like, it's just like all this stuff combined, it just really, if you just look at it intuitively, it just makes sense that it's going to fail, that these nations are going to continue on with this effort. All right. Now, take a look at the article I leave down in the description for you guys. This is coming out of Asia Times. What is Russia doing when it sells oil to China? It's getting yuans. What is it doing with the yuan? Selling it off for dollars and euros. Why? Because all the trading partners out there around the world still want dollars. And now when you read this article, look at one of the problems. It's the derivatives market, right? Things that represent the yuan, the renminbi, right? Things, the debt market of the United States government, the U.S. Treasury market, I guess is what I'm saying, provides that ultimate asset, that gold. Now, when you look at China, you can't find that. Now, even if they wanted to, like provide the world with the world reserve currency, they have to provide them with a safe and liquid asset, right? Like a U.S. Treasury. But they don't do that because they are not deep into debt like the United States is. This is the major difference in it. And now when you have nations all around the world who have promised to make their payments in US dollars, what do you think they're going to ask for when they go to sell their products off? When they go to do their exports and they have debts that are due in dollars, and when they go to buy food for their nation, they're doing it in dollars. What's going to happen? Right? The dollar is going to continue to hold its dominance. And that's exactly what we're finding right now. Don't fall for all the stuff that you hear out there. Like, I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, when you see it, when you find these deals that are taking place. All this stuff very much and logically definitely makes sense when you see it that way. But then you have to understand there's more to the story, right? And what is Russia doing once it gets the yuans, right? They're getting in the dollars. And so when I think about like what's going to happen going into the future, why would you want dollars? It's because there's going to come a food shortage coming. Look at the article that I leave down in the description. Rice, what is it? 20% drop in production. Like, what was it? I think this is the biggest in 20 years, if I remember right. Anyway, I'll leave a link down in the description for you guys. Think about rice, right? Rice is probably the #1 staple around the world, and there's a 20% drop in production. What were we talking about just recently with the wheat going off in Ukraine, right? Because of the Ukraine exports, it's now disrupting the rest of the farmers out there. I had a person tell me, man, you're completely wrong. I'm a farmer. I know this industry. You're missing it. It's all about war and fertilizer and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, it's not. I mean, yeah, it is. I mean, that's all the symptoms and all the problems that contribute to it. The real problem is that farmers are not going to be sowing their seeds knowing that they have an issue trying to distribute their stuff that they have today. Like, if you're sitting on a pile of it and you can't get rid of it, why would you go and make more? That's what it really comes down to. Okay. So if you look at it that way, I mean, yeah, sure. Like, you could see that in the end, it's going to be like, eventually all the stuff will distribute and everybody will go back to, farming and everything will be back to normal at some point. I mean, it will get there. But the disruptions that take place between now and then are going to be extreme. This is the bullwhip effect, right? I mean, it's not exactly like the bullwhip effect like we experienced in lumber, but it's very similar in a sense. When you have an extreme amount of inventory piled up, what happens to the production? It falls. Right? I mean, it can happen in anything. It doesn't matter if it's bicycles or lumber or wheat or rice or anything else out there. It all goes through the same scenario when you have such a disruption that has taken place like we have. Don't count the dollar out yet. There is going to be failure of the dollar at some point in the future. I am sure of it. Right? There is very little doubt in my mind that all fiat currencies eventually fail, and there's very little doubt in my mind that the dollar will fail at some point too. But there's a path to get there. Right? And when you see even nations who are trying to do everything they can to get out of the dollar, forced right back into it again, because that's the deal, that is what is occurring today. Nobody wants anything else. Right? Eventually it might go to gold. Eventually it might go to Bitcoin. Eventually it might go to one of the BRICS nations. But think about what it is that has to occur in order for those things, to take place. I mean, yeah, you can go back to a gold standard. How much would gold need to be worth in order to facilitate all the trades of all the people around the entire world? I have a hard time even fathoming what it takes for the U.S. Treasuries to do it in the United States dollar. It's incredible how many transactions, how many contracts, how many people are due in dollars. And when the people decide that they're going to get out of that, it's going to cause an extreme demand for dollars because they have to get out of those contracts. I mean, just look at it right now. If you were, just a few months ago, we were doing, reports on Sri Lanka, who was suffering horribly with medical and food imports because of the dollar shortages that they were experiencing. And this is going to continue. This is... I mean, this is the equilibrium that is going to take, it's going to take years to get to the equilibrium, right? To find where it is that the balance is going to be. You disrupt the supply chain. You disrupt the global, the way the globe was their partnerships, right? You completely disrupt that. Now people are building new partnerships. They're building new distribution lines. They're building new ways of doing their business because the whole system has been flipped on its head, right? Like here, even the United States, we experienced it with lumber when the tariffs were kicking, when the trade wars. Remember Trump's trade wars? China gave us the finger on logs. A lot of people don't remember that, but I know because the area that I am in, right? And they gave us the finger on logs, and log exports had fallen dramatically, right? And the log prices had fallen, and this was at the same time that lumber was starting to shoot up in price, and people were like, how come the loggers aren't getting money when the lumber prices are moving up? That's the reason, right? Because logs are an exporting item, not just a milled up item here in the United States. But what we've seen with that when they did those trade wars, right, is they severed the friendship between China and the United States on those exporting the logs. Now it's starting up again. We're starting to export more. But during that time, Russia picked it up. They were like, hey, we got plenty of forestry products up here. And Russia moved into the #1 spot of forestry, of being the #1 exporter of forestry products during that time. I don't know if they still are. I believe Canada is, but I could be wrong on that. But it definitely happened during COVID. I remember doing reports on that one. They were setting up rail lines to handle, in rail cars, to handle the additional forestry products to get them from the woods to the ports in a more efficient manner. We were doing reports on that during the time. So these are the type of things that I keep an eye out for. It's not always just as simple as it seems. And when you find articles like the one I leave down in the description for you guys, you really have to question everybody who has called for dollar failure when Russia's still wanting them. Okay, King Dollar, at least for a while. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.